people often ask me, like, what book should I read? Well, read American Lion if you want to read about Andrew Jackson because he was OG.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to A Conversation with Colin. I'm Greg, and this is my roommate, Colin. Now, sometimes Colin says crazy stuff. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I reach into my random topic pile, pull one out, toss it at him, and we talk it out for your amusement. If you like that, like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to us here on YouTube. Colin, are you ready?
Yes.
Today's topic of conversation is, if you could go back in time with your current knowledge, what advice would you give the Founding Fathers? This is from @King_Zelos. So you're going to go back to 1492.
Right, 1492.
Now you're going to go back to the 1700s there.
Right,
Talk to Ben Franklin, Thomas J, as I call him, my big friend.
TJ?
Big TJ over
TJ
there.
at VA?
Yeah. What are you going to say to these guys?
There's a few pieces of advice I got. I think they pretty much nailed it, with the Constitution.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first? Because I have the most obvious ones.
Okay.
You
can I have a few, but yeah, you can go ahead.
Obviously, get rid of "In God We Trust." What were you thinking? They come in this whole thing of like, America's this country where religion won't matter, separation of church and state, and then they immediately fuck it up with all this in God. They should have barred any mention of God from the Constitution or anything.
But you're misunderstanding what they mean by
this. Is what I'm saying as a dumb person, and keep in mind, dumb people like me are what's ruining America. With their just like, well, it says "In God We Trust." Clear. Let's have the 10 Commandments in a courthouse. Go fuck yourself. So that's number one. And number two, obviously, is they should have abolished slavery right there. Figured some way around that. All men are created equal. Maybe include women in that. Somehow spell out that slavery and bigotry is wrong, and let's nip that in the bud.
Right.
But
so all men created equal is not in the Constitution.
Oh, I apologize.
That's in the Declaration of Independence.
Sorry, my bad.
And
whatever.
What?
Did I say Constitution?
Well,
earlier on I did.
Well, we're talking. I mean, I assume we're talking like. I don't know what kind of advice we give. The Declaration obviously worked. That was our Declaration of Independence. We thought the revolution was over. That's not a legal document.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think, all right, so "In God We Trust," I have no problem with the God mentions, because like what we're not realizing about the Founding Fathers, a lot of people are ignorant about the Founding Fathers, is it's not, when they were trying to separate church and state, it wasn't about secularism, you know what I mean? It wasn't about atheism. That wasn't even a thing with them. A lot of them were deists, but there was a lot of religious founders or whatever. That wasn't uncommon at the time.
Sure.
What they were really talking about was removing the state from a specific church, a specific, basically Christian church.
Right.
Because in England, the Church of England was tied up with the government of England ever since Henry VIII, right? So, we have this thing where they're coming over, but in Maryland, for instance, there was a lot of Catholics, right? Yeah. In Pennsylvania, there were a lot of Quakers. In Massachusetts, there were a lot of Puritans. These are all Protestant religions, except for Catholicism, of course. But a lot of them had come over early, the Mayflower and all that kind of stuff in the 1620s, 1630s, to get away from the persecution religiously by a state-run church. So that was what they were saying when they were separating church and state, was to say, like, there's no official church. None of the Protestant churches or the Catholic Church could be the official church.
And I'm down with that, but I feel like now you jump ahead to our day and age, right? And it feels like it's Christianity, right, is what's invasive and tied up in American politics.
Sure.
Now, granted, as you already pointed out, obviously, a lot of Christian religions happening around at the same time, you know what I mean? Now, they should have spelled that out a bit more, right? I don't mind. It's like, similar to what I'm saying. In God we trust, God being whatever God you believe in. That's, yada, yada, yada. Fine. But like now we're to the point where we have to argue about a 10 Commandments in the building or this, that. It's just,
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, I don't think they anticipated this particular problem. It's the same thing, like, when people talk about the Second Amendment, in the Bill of Rights, which is they didn't anticipate the assault rifle. Now, if they knew the assault rifle existed, would they care? Probably not.
Yeah.
But, just like we talked about in the Second Amendment conversation with Colin about, that was designed for a specific reason, which was to protect yourself from tyranny. So too was the separation of church and state was simply to protect minority religious people from a state-run religion. That's it. Like, it's not about like saying like, well, God's not going to be in anything. We still swear in the Bible and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I understand what you're saying. I don't think it should be tied up in that either.
It just feels like we lost so much of that, right? Where like now what always really gets me not angry, but like when it's just like, what are you talking? When people like give Scientologists shit. You know what I mean? I don't care. Believe in whatever you believe in. I hope it makes you a better person. But like people are like, so quick to be like, Scientology, what a load of crap. You know what I mean? Right. Clearly, our 3-part God who rose from the dead and did all these things, he's got to be true. But you're aliens. Come on now.
Yeah. I try not to judge any religion.
Sure.
Really. I mean, because I think they're all kind of equally silly.
And real quick, if you keep asking Colin to talk about religion, go watch the episode Conversation with Colin Ghosts. It's all there. String theory too.
Yeah, a good little string theory. Vibrating strings across multiple universes.
Like Spider-Man. Remember in The Amazing Spider-Man, of course, when he went into the sewer and he did the thing out and then he waited for the things to vibrate and then he'd fight the lizard.
Right.
There was just like a little bunch of geckos that came out.
I saw that movie. That was the second one, right?
No, that's the second coming of Spider-Man.
Right, but the first one in that one.
Right.
I saw that on an airplane. That was an unfortunate movie. So all right, yeah. So I agree. With slavery, there is like somewhat of a kill clause in the Constitution in terms of the importation of slaves.
Okay.
But they didn't outright ban slavery. Now, yes, this would have been the total ideal, right? But they didn't want, and I'm not justifying it at all. So of course it's wrong, but there was just too much. There was too many land-based, plantation-based politics in doing that, especially in the South. And you have to understand, many of the founders were from Virginia, right? Yeah. And we're talking about a lot of the most powerful guys you can think of are all landed gentry, as it were, right? So like Washington and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe, like these guys are all Virginians, right? They call it the Virginia Dynasty. So like to get the entire country to coalesce into one after the war, in which they didn't really even trust each other during this time, right? Like there was a lot of problems during the Constitutional Convention. There were a lot of problems in 1775, 1776, the Continental Congress and all that stuff. They didn't like each other and they didn't trust each other because they all had different needs and wants. You had like a merchant class in Boston that had no need for slaves. You had religious people in Pennsylvania that really didn't believe in slavery morally, and you had people in the South that couldn't figure out how to run their business without them. And it's not to say that they were right, it's just to say that they had a compromise. So the compromise was like, well, we're going to stop importing slaves at a certain date, and we'll have like this kind of slave, like internal slave trade from there on out. And slowly the states took advantage of the 10th Amendment rather, and kind of knocked slavery out one by one. But of course we fought a war to get rid of it completely. And that was a long time after the Constitutional Convention. That was like 80 years later. So this was a boiling point. This was a big contentious issue with a lot of people, and a lot of the founders didn't believe in it. But they knew that they had a compromise, and I wish that they realized that they were compromising on people's lives, basically. Sure. So I agree with you there. And then, of course, a woman's right to vote. This is a major issue as well. And it's just a sign of the times, and it's bad. And it sucks that it took us until the 19-teens to really, figure this out. The suffragette kind of movement around World War I was, part and parcel really with Prohibition. And it took us a long time to figure that out, and that's too bad. So those are the kinds of things I'd tell them to grapple with, like you were saying. And I think there's like little things too that they could have dealt with, like the Third Amendment what the Third Amendment is? No one ever talks about it.
No, not off the top of my head.
So the Third Amendment is...
Period. I mean, you're going to say it and I'll be like, I remember studying that once, but no.
The Third Amendment is ridiculous. I appreciate why they did it, because of what happened, especially in Boston during the Revolution, and New York City. But it's that the American government can never quarter soldiers in your house.
Oh, right.
And that was because there was something called the Quartering Act in 1774, where the British would send troops to Boston and they can just live with you and eat your food and do whatever they want. And that happened in New York City when New York City was occupied during the whole revolution. So we had this like weird amendment where it's like, the fuck is this even doing here? But like you have to understand that that's their mentality. They were afraid.
Sure.
It's just it's the Third Amendment in many ways supports what the Second Amendment's all about. It's not to go hunting. It's not to have a pistol. It's to protect yourself from the government. And the very next amendment basically proves it, because that is what they're scared of with the Third Amendment. It's like, you can't ever do that again.
Yeah.
So I'd like let them know, like, maybe that's not a thing we need to worry about. But they didn't know at the time. They expected the British were going to come back and fight them again, and they did in 1812. And they won. When they did it, they burned the fucking White House down. We kind of started that war, by the way. We invaded Canada in that war.
Well, they had it coming. They're our hat.
We wanted to seize Canada.
All the wood.
All the wood.
All the maple.
Like Quebec and Ontario. If that war went a different way, that whole section might be part of the United States, the maritime provinces. Mm-hmm. We also wanted Cuba, and that happened later in the Spanish-American War in 1898. But so there's like little things there, like where you read some of this stuff and you're like, I don't know. Maybe I know a lot of people have problems with the Electoral College. I don't. I think it makes perfect sense. But a lot of people don't. So maybe But we're not a democracy. We're a republic. So it's not about the popular vote. It's about representative government. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Those are the kinds of things I can think about. I don't know if you can think of anything else. But
no, I got mine off top. But again, mine were very top level. I would go back and start screaming at them, and then they'd shoot me for wearing different clothes.
For sure. They wouldn't like that.
They would be like,
they would be putting their powder in there, in their musket. You'd probably run away. You'd probably be all right.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty slow.
But Yeah, I mean, I just think it's kind of funny to read. I really encourage people to go out there and read the Federalist Papers, especially because the Federalist Papers are really fascinating. The Federalist Papers were written by James Madison and John Jay and Alexander Hamilton, but at the time, no one knew who wrote them. And it wasn't until they were all dead that anyone realized who wrote what.
Oh, really?
And they would submit these essays to newspapers with pen names, explaining why certain things in the Constitutional Convention in 1787, 1786, 1788, why they were reaching these certain conclusions, and no one knew who wrote them. John Jay wrote a few, but Hamilton and Madison wrote the lion's share of them. And they would explain themselves, and you can really get an idea of where they were coming from with the decisions they were making by reading these papers, because people thought they were just op-ed, editorialists writing these, but later when they realized, like, wow, actually James Madison wrote these himself, and he wrote the fucking Constitution, then you can start to kind of understand where they were coming from. So that's some of the best reading in American history. Like, people often ask me, like, what book should I read? Read American Lion if you want to read about Andrew Jackson because he was OG. You can read about all these kinds of things, but read the Federalist Papers. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, now you all have homework. On top of watching all our videos, go read the Federalist Papers. And thank you, King Zealous, for your conversation with Colin. That wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. What do you want to see Colin talk about? Let us know in the comments. Then make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to us on YouTube. Colin, as always, thank you for your time. And until next time, have a conversational day.